I've been alive now this century for 25 years, as long as I was alive in the last one for 25 years. So that's almost 50 years. For the first 20 years of my life, to say anything positive about the right in the West Country and in South Wales made you an evil person. And I'm not overstating that. It was framed as evil, basically.
I remember when I saw him for the first time. I don't know if he was transitioning to be a girl or what, but he would come in heels, a dress, and he had arms as big as mine, like literally big as mine. I swear to you, right? And I was just like shocked.
I'm hoping and waiting for the golden age to affect Britain in the cultural sphere before the political one. We don't have a chance just yet. But for the satire to come back in, for someone else to come in at the BBC, for another, I'm not actually, I don't want the BBC to die. I want it to change because it's nice having a broadcaster which the world respects.
If you are new to this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out our merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. We've got some cool t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweaters. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And if you're now starting a spiritual journey, you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you're currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 and it will help you to get some magic mushrooms. Enjoy the show and stay tuned because we have some more great content coming soon. Hello, beautiful and amazing people. Welcome back to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host, Todd Cave. And today we welcome first-time guest Sean Parker, who is an artist, writer, musician, specializes in art, cultural theory, and justice reform. Since gaining a master's degree in fine art from the University for the Creative Arts in 2003, he has published a number of books, albums, and articles. He lived in Istanbul for 10 years, performed at or curated many festivals, given a TED Talk, been played on BBC Radio, and had some of his work exhibited at the London's South Bank. He was born in Exeter in 1975, currently lives on the West Sussex Coast. He writes on cancel culture, politics, justice reform, and is a critic of the extremes of progressive culture. Now, this was a really interesting conversation because Sean is a fellow Brit like myself, and I think that he's the first Brit that I've spoken to on the show. And what a lot of people don't realize is that Britain and Europe are probably about 30 years ahead of the other Western countries like United States and Canada. And we've seen a real disintegration of the UK through things like mass migration. And in our case, it is through a lot of Islamic migration. And what people don't realize is that people that follow the Islamic faith tend to have very big families. So what is happening to the diaspora of Europe is that it is changing a lot. And in the next 30-40 years, there will be a very, very big percentage of the population, which always causes a lot of issues as Islam grows. So this episode is going to really dive into some of the things and the issues that we have in Britain and in Europe. And for those that are living in North America, if you want to see where your country can possibly go, listen to this episode and listen to the stuff that Sean shares.
When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You gotta be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why it is really hard to really crack the matrix because there's so many levels and layers to it, you know? Sean, Welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much, Todd. I'm delighted to be here. It's a bit stormy outside, but I'm cozy and warm in here, so I'm all good.
When is it not stormy in the UK?
Yeah, very, very true. Half the time.
You know, one of the things that was really difficult for me in my adjustment to the UK, because I was born in Barbados and I went to the UK as a young man, and it was just the weather. It was just like really, really hard for me because coming from a tropical island where it is hot every day, sunshine 98% of the time, you know, high 90s at least. And it was just very difficult. And I find that kind of like affects the way you are as a person. You're a little bit antisocial, and some of the things like, you know, when you go into the gym, for example, you say good morning. And always when I used to come back from the UK to Barbados, it used to take me like a half a day to remember, okay, we actually greet each other when you see each other. And even when you get in the bus, you say, hello, good morning, you know? So it's a very different mentality I find in the developed West, the UK, from the tropics and generally hot countries, you know?
Yeah. It's like you get home as quickly as you can in order to get warm in the northern hemisphere, the further north you go, because of that climate, and then that just becomes endemic in what you do, whatever the weather is. So yeah,
it is true. And you know, it's really good to talk to a fellow Brit today. And I wanted to talk to you because, you know, I'm a Brit myself, and I realized that a lot of people there and in the West, for that matter, seem to be more woke / progressive than anything else. So I wanted to shine a light on this mind virus, because the powers that shouldn't be seem to be ramming this ideology down our throats, and hardly anyone is pushing back against it or doing anything at all about it. So before we get started into these topics and stuff, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what caused you to basically put your neck out there at risk, really, of being cancelled and even talking about these things? Because there's always a story, there's always an event or events that have led people to do what they do. So I always like to find out what is people's story, what is their why, and stuff like that.
As you said in your intro, I'm an artist and writer, and until between 2004 and 2014, I was living in Istanbul as a musician, observing the culture wars going on out there, where an Islamic mass country, which is what Turkey is secular for 100 years. You know, it does the law of not God. But the president there is an Islamist and has been trying for 20 years to bring back a form of Turkish Islamic law to that country. And I was living there as a British man with lots of secular friends, which a third of Turkey is. They're very fiercely secular and defending of people like me. So, and our values, you know, so I could observe the culture clash happening there. When I came back in 2014, my stepdad said, as I got into the car coming back from Heathrow, he said, it's changed very much here. You're not going to believe it. I'm like, right. And before you knew it, I had seen Me Too become a real palpable thing in the streets and in the cafes, like between the men and women. The culture was pushing people apart slowly, insidiously. And then the Black Lives Matter of 2020, like over 2014 to 2024 to now, this kind of gradual ramping up with the Brexit and the first sort of Trump incumbency. They seemed to go crazy. That drove them crazy, and they brought in a very highly financed George Soros rush of energy into pushing the progressive thing in the media, supported by The Guardian and BBC and CNN and everyone else, and then COVID, which is a whole other subject, until now, last year with Trump coming back, where the rational world appears to have said enough. So we're doing this podcast at an interesting time where Trump's just been elected back in, and it's almost like people are saying enough.
Yeah, it's true, because like I said, and all my audience knows, I've lived in the UK for many years, and I remember when they went to the UK in 2002, it was like the first 3 years were like the final last really good years. And it was only like, I would say around 2006, 2007, that I started to realize that there are topics that you're not really allowed to talk about. And there viewpoints and opinions and ideas that you aren't simply allowed to have. And as a young man at the time, I mean, I didn't really take much notice of it because, I was an immigrant. I was just looking to, level up my life, get me a job, and, make a career, But as I started to get a little bit older, and I remember one of the major wake-ups that I had was the 2007, 2008 crisis. And that is what really showed me how corrupt the system is. Because I remember they paid the banksters their bonuses. And I think at the time, was it Tony Blair? He was the prime minister? I think he was.
Just coming out of being it.
Yeah, because Gordon Brown was just in transition to go in. And I think it was Gordon Brown, he said that we had to pay them because they're the ones that can save the economy. And I was like, but they just wrecked it. So they got paid for failure, And then when you started to point out the fact that they're the ones that caused the failure, you were actually very much silenced. You were very much cast aside and poo-pooed and said, you basically were blackballed. And I wanted to look at where the transition is, because you were born in the UK. I came, in 2002. So, like, how have you seen change from the time you were a boy to like now? Like, what are like some of the most important points that you saw or events that were like very instrumental for this culture that we have today really getting its wings and becoming very dominant, I would say?
Well, I've been alive now this century for 25 years, as long as I was alive in the last one for 25 years. So that's almost 50 years. And in the last sort of century, I was born into a left-wing bohemian middle class for family, like into a drama family. My dad was a drama lecturer in Exeter, that kind of thing. And my mum was a speech therapist, this kind of background. And they were proudly left-wing, Tony Benn, Michael Foot, all that kind of thing, the old left, which was anti-Thatcher of those years. And for the first 20 years of my life, to say anything positive about the right in the West Country and in South Wales made you an evil person. And I'm not overstating that. It was framed as evil, basically. It wasn't until I was 17 that I met a young sort of Tory who was completely normal. And well, good Lord, a Conservative, and you're normal. So at 17 years old, my mind started to open with what the other side was. Discovered Nietzsche, Roger Scruton, other writers, other philosophers who were coming from the right, because I'd only known of Marx and things on the left. So as you grow, you start to put all the sides together into yourself. And then when I went to art school at 22 in 97, just as Tony Blair was coming in, and I realised that arts education. I went back as a mature student at just 22, like a couple of years later, and they took away the student grants and they brought in tuition fees, and it's like, all right, this is arts education for money. This is a business, and I started to have my mind opened again to what business was, how they didn't really have ideology anymore. And then within a couple of years, there was 9/11, which of course shook the world and made everyone, for our generation, it's our JFK and things, watching the Twin Towers come down and watching how it damaged America's confidence for, since. And it kind of grew in that weird way. And then I started to see terrorism everywhere in the papers, every single day. Bombs, terror, bombs, terror, bombs, terror. And it's like, when you look around you and there's no bombs and no terror, and there's nothing going on, it's just something that you've seen on the telly. I started to explore Baudrillard, the French philosopher, who said, these things didn't actually exist. He didn't mean it didn't happen. It just meant it didn't happen to you. You were just seeing it like you would see things like you've never had in the past. You wouldn't hear gossip from the other side of the world. Now we hear gossip from the other side of the world. And that affected me and made me realize what the media was, the power of the media. And then within a couple of years, I went out to Istanbul because to see what being in an Islamic country was like. I had some Turkish friends who I missed very much. I went out to spend some time with them because I knew it wasn't them, it was the politics. And then by the time I got back, there had been a big ramping up of immigration, which had started back with Blair. And, in a naivety that it's all going to be fine. And now with things like the grooming gangs, if just for one example of it, we're seeing the chickens come home to roost in the most sort of terrible way.
Yeah, it's true. And, there is, like, I remember when I was living in the UK, there seemed to be this unwritten rule that you are not allowed to criticize, critique, or mention anything in the Islamic ideology. And I always found it quite strange that you're not allowed to talk about what is actually in their books and their texts. And I've done a few shows where I have highlighted some of the things. And, people try to push back. But the thing is, right, is that when it comes to Islam, there's a lot of things that people don't realize about Islam. One, Islam is actually not a religion. Islam is what you call a deen. And a deen is a political system that uses religious ideology to propel and to promote its ideology, right? So it's really, if you look in the Islamic text, it's not classified a religion. It's called a deen. That is something that a lot of people don't know. And I have researched a lot about Islam, and I try to tell people that there's a difference between Islam, the ideology, and a Muslim, the person. And what I do is I critique the ideology, but for some reason, when you try to critique an ideology, which is an idea, hence the root word ideology, somehow the media casts you as being an Islamophobe or hating Muslims. Why do you think that we have been told that you're not allowed to critique an idea, and they always throw stones at people and accuse them of being an Islamophobe and hating of a Muslim, which is a person? What do you think that is?
Well, the first thing to say, I think, is that we, as in the West and the cultural Christians type of thing, have had the 300 years of the Enlightenment, where the science took over from Christianity for a while, and now it's got into a place of everything being tolerated, including science and everything else. And that puts you in a place where Christianity, which has its historical issues as Islam does, into it doesn't have the strength and the fear that it once had. And lots of Christians will say, for better or worse. That's an argument for them to have. And so that's a couple of 100 years of what I would call a different advancement, to be polite, from what the Islamic thing, which is like, don't touch the texts. And lots of them are fundamentalists. However, billions of them aren't. And that's important to remember about it. I'm not going to give any excuses for Islam. It's 1.8 billion people. So how can you generalize, any more than you can with Christianity and all our sects? The other part of your question, I think, observation, is that the multiculturalism project, which has its roots, it's being exposed as being a socialist thing of like 100 years old, 200 maybe back to the French origins of communism, and then the Russian origins of communism. And now we've got postmodern communism international, which is not about, they don't talk about class and money anymore. They talk about the green thing and about respecting everybody, whatever, and all cultures are equal. And inside that, the enemy is white Western capitalism, and we can chuck in male as well for extra points. And that anything that goes against that is okay, including whatever nightmares deep Islam does, which is female genital mutilation. Insult me and I'll execute you. That entire insult me and I'll execute you part is so incompatible with British satire, which is an incredibly strong and deep, powerful thing for 100 years of pantomime to Monty Python to the Frost Report to Brass Eye. It's fucking deep inside us. And excuse my French. And the way they've unraveled that is the reason why we're all, the middle classes are so angry now. You know, how dare they do that? Never mind the grooming gangs. How dare they do that to satire? You know, so you put all these little issues together and it's being exposed as a socialist experiment to make everyone the same. And that's why lots of us aren't too down with socialism anymore.
Yeah, because I remember as a boy, because in Barbados, we used to get a lot of British TV back in the 80s and 90s. And I remember there was a program called Yes Minister. And that was absolutely hilarious. And they used to take the piss out of everybody, right? And it was absolutely hilarious. And then he became the prime minister. So it was Yes, Prime Minister. But I'm almost certain that Yes Minister today would not be allowed to air, especially on the BBC. And it would be very much frowned upon. Am I just supposing, or do you think that that's a similar belief as well?
It's a spot-on observation. They don't do critical things of the government anymore, whatever the colour of the party, because the media and the political class of the centre of London, which they'll call the elite, which is a word I'd like to keep away from, but I know what they mean. You know, it's the political and media dinner party set telling us all we're a bunch of plebs, and you're not allowed to criticise the government anymore, even by humour. And that's why nobody's watching. They're all going to the internet and to the podcast revolution, which is, here we are, much, much more a place where people can openly speak. And I'm hoping and waiting for the golden age to affect Britain in the cultural sphere before the political one. We don't have a chance just yet. But for the satire to come back in, for someone else to come in at the BBC, for another, you know, I'm not actually, I don't want the BBC to die. I want it to change, because it's nice having a broadcaster which the world respects. It's just the world doesn't get that most of the people here think it's a pile of shit. So we're like trying to say, can you please just be a bit more investigative, probative, like you used to be, satirical, which is a 2,000-year-old challenge to power. That's how things really go forward, you know. And we're stuck in this cultural cancel world of, if you don't go along with utter progressivism, then you're cancelled, you're dead, you know. And I think we're on the other side of it now, by the way, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, the thing is, right, is that I think fundamentally, I don't know if it can change, because the way the system is set up, and the BBC is supposed to be for the British Broadcasting Corporation, but in reality is the British Brainwashing Corporation, because the BBC, I think, is one of the worst. Like, people talk about CNN. I think BBC is the worst of the worst on the planet, right? Mm-hmm. Worse than Sky News. Like, there are programs on the BBC that really push this wokeism. And, like, it's almost like they don't even care about the viewership. They just put out this, like, someone like Paul Joseph Watson, he calls it the message. I tend to like that term, the message, where, like, it's all transgenderism, wokeism, right is left, up is down, boy can be girl. And I'm like, there's no logic here. And then what people don't understand is that the brainwashing is so well oiled that I think the only way is that for in like how we have podcasts, and I do agree with you. I think that podcasting is the revolution. That they say the revolution won't be televised. I think that the revolution is happening already in the podcast arena. And I think that satirists and people of comedy will start to need to do their own shows on things like podcasts. And I think that people will actually support them in terms of a subscription model, because instead of you giving your money to BBC and getting brainwashing, I'm sure that most people would prefer to, you know, have an independent program where people are taking the piss out of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The Jews, the Muslims, the Christians, the government, the fat ones, the skinny ones, the bodybuilders. You know what I mean? Like, you have to take the piss out of everyone. If not, then what is life really, right? If you're not allowed to laugh, you're not allowed to because comedy is one of the things that I find is able to change the culture. And this is probably why the culture wars have been really hard on even the arts, right? Because the kind of art that they promote, I'll be honest, is just horse manure, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's ugly. There's nothing revolutionary about it. It goes away from the classical. It goes away from actual beauty. And I think that, more people are going to have to start just becoming independent and doing shows like this, because if not, free speech, which funnily in the UK, we don't actually have free speech, because unlike the United States, they have a constitution where they have quotation marks free speech. But in Britain, we don't have that. We have something called hate speech, which the government uses to control how we're able to talk about certain things in public. So the matrix / the machine tries to cancel you if you don't basically follow the line. So, like, have you been attacked or ridiculed or blackballed because of some of your quotation marks controversial stances?
I think I'm not a very combative person. I don't go out there deliberately trying to wind people up, and I think people spot that, and they just know that I'm trying to wrestle with the realities that you just mentioned. So I don't think I'm controversial. I certainly don't try to be. So I don't get that much of a spanking online. Occasionally, people come out and say, "I can't believe you just said that." And I said, well, I can't believe that you're trying to stop me saying it, but I just come back at it like an old school comedian sort of would. But we get called dinosaur. Even you and I having this chat now, dinosaur. However, that said, I'm fascinated by Gen Z now are apparently 50-50 divide, and actually to the tune of 60-40, 60% being very critical of what woke stuff, because their parents, the millennials, are actually the problem, the properly woke, the between 25 and 35, those are the real sort of everything's got to be progressive or die. The ones underneath them have seen it all, and it's like they want to rebel against that. So they're starting to get things like a sense of naturalism, natural justice, natural things, because I use the word natural because I find it the most easy way of trying to point out what the left, international left, without saying Labour and Democrats, I mean, and Europe, are trying to do, is to take the natural human away from his or herself and into like this conjoined massive. Yes, we're indeed all connected spiritually. Don't get me wrong with that, and we're all part of the human race, but we are all individuals. And as far as I'm aware, you and I are different individuals, and that needs to be respected. And they're not respecting that. They're trying to take us away and to say, put all your faith in technology, put it all in AI, in plastic surgery, and if you don't feel like a man, Sean, you can go and be a woman by having it lopped off. And we're just starting to say now, no, you can't. No, you can't. You're just taking plastic surgery to a mental level, and you can be and trans people. I've got a handful of trans friends. All of them think it's bullshit. They all think all of the overdoingness of it is not helping them, and they're right. They want to go back to being a bit quieter, please, as you might want to when you're doing something which is unusual, because I'm not going to have a go at trans people, but I do have a go at the trans industry, which is the problem. Keep away from the kids, keep it when it comes to surgery. Over 25, do what you want. Under that, under 20, don't be telling people they're in the wrong body, and that's what we're seeing right now.
But it's funny, right? Because even just saying that can be classified as being controversial and can get you cancelled. And I find it quite very strange that a place like Britain that had the Magna Carta. I think it's in 1400 and something, 1410, if my memory is correct, something like that. To go from that to where you can't even speak common sense. You can't even say, hold on a minute, there are only two genders. There's only boys and girls. Yes, you can think you're a purple penguin, but that's your imagination. Great. But they don't want to pick up a biology book and actually look to see, well, actually, no. You have male genitalia, so you're a boy. You have female genitalia, you're a girl. And I remember this whole transgender thing. I remember there was a guy I used to work with. And, well, he's a guy, but I remember when I saw him for the first time, he was working in the office. I don't know if he was transitioning to be a girl or what, but he would come in heels, a dress, and he had arms as big as mine, like literally as big as mine. I swear to you, right? This was like 2014, and I was just like shocked. And you would see the looks that people would have, and they'd be like, how weird is that? But it got even weirder because his wife had 3 children from him, and then he became a woman. And I'm like, so how does this work out now? Where, like, how do your children identify you as dad or mom? And it's like, back then you could still actually say that's weird. But now, even if you say in 2025 that's weird, you get punished, you get spanked, right? Like, I know for sure I cannot put this conversation on YouTube. So it's going to be only on alternative platforms because they heavily spank you. And I think it's just absolutely mad that a place like the UK that's supposed to be this place where freedom of speech was born, you know, having rights as a human being through the Magna Carta. Now we are just seen as the plebs. We're seen as not even the working class. We're seen like under the working class now. We're just seen as, like, I guess that guy Harari says, the useless eaters, right? This is how they seem to deem us, you know? So, you know, during the pandemic, we really saw how powerful the mind virus was because the British government severely punished anyone who had a different opinion of the state's narratives. So now the government has changed from Conservative to Labour. How have things changed or become better or worse with regards to having alternative thought online?
I think that people have woken up to the reality of the uniparty. It's a bit of a it's a bit of a cliche now to say that the Labour and Conservative are the same kind of elite beast as the Republicans and Democrats are over there. And Mr. Trump is seen as being outside of that uniparty, and Mr. Farage over here, Nigel Farage, is seen as outside of the uniparty. We have yet to see. He's still very much the coming man. And in terms of, because I'm on this line because Boris Johnson did what he had to do in 2020, and we are very aware that Keir Starmer would have done exactly the same and probably worse in 2020 as well. He'd have used that as the most amazing excuse to shut us all up and down. We're here 4 years later without an imminent pandemic on, and we shouldn't even call it pandemic, it's lockdown, because there's enough out there saying this wasn't as lethal as it's made out, to put it kindly. You know, so it's like lots of independent-minded people worked out what can be done to you. So it's like, as I was talking about the 911 earlier having an effect on my political understanding of the world, this one would have had an effect on many about their understanding of the world now. And the mental health, we've got like a massive mushrooming of, I can't remember the numbers, of people on mental health sick with anxiety and stuff like that, saying they've got anxiety, loads and loads of autism and ADHD diagnoses coming in there as well. And this is all big psych and big pharma at the same time as the COVID. making everyone stay at home, and the person saying, "Yeah, I'm quite comfortable at home actually," and I'm not about to have a go at benefits, because being an artist, I've spent lots of my life on benefits, supporting me here and there, helping me through this difficult time, that difficult time. But I would never use that as an excuse not to work. There's a difference between that. It's not the left. There's a suspicion that the left sees benefits as a way of having everybody not work in order that you can control them. I mean, I'm not sure how true that is, and I mean, because I don't know anybody who's able to live on benefits in a comfortable way. There's all kinds of hoops you have to jump through, and I don't want to be hypocritical about it, but that has definitely changed this time with this, with the degree of scrutiny that they did over the lockdown period. I don't think it will survive again. I think we'll have to see a person drop dead in front of us on the street with a flesh-eating disease before we actually believe in a virus again. So that's a win. I don't know.
You say that, but and I agree with you. But then let's play devil's advocate here for a minute. So I see people, and I'm on holiday right now, and in the country I'm in now, I'm seeing people still wearing masks. Obviously a minority, but some people. Where my country that I live in now, I'm seeing the same thing. I know my mate has told me that in the UK is the same thing. It's fascinating to me that you still have people that 4 years, well, going 5 after the event, people are still wearing masks, which from my mate's side, he thought humanity's screwed. These people are too stupid. And so how have you seen the shift in the consciousness in terms of, like, one, people still wearing masks, and two, do you think then that enough people have woken up that if the government were to try something like that again, that people will simply say, no, I'm just not doing it? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a very good question. I haven't seen what your friend's saying about loads of people with masks. There are some who just seem to be very neurotic, or possibly are properly ill and have a good reason to keep it on. And there are also a younger cohort of street hoodies who go around wearing masks in order not to be recognised, which is a whole other sort of, who looks well dodgy. But of course, in the pandemic time, if you didn't put a mask on, you'd be arrested. So it's like, no wonder they're confused. So it's like, health-wise, I think there's a bit of a hangover from that, and they were so traumatized by, you're going to die if, we were wondering if a virus could jump onto various sort of surfaces and jump into your mouth and stuff, weren't we? And until you sort of realize, my God, what was I living through? What bollocks? And hopefully, I'm thinking that the powers that be, the media powers that be, have been surprised by the amount of anger and pushback there was in all Western countries, except for Sweden, which we should have arguably done, about what happened. I think they were expecting it to be much easier than, okay, we did stay at home because by and large we're obedient, but at the same time as they're staying at home, there was a hell of a racket about how dare you do this to us. So it's like you're being kept in, but also still being able to express. It's not all about being cancelled on YouTube. There's anywhere, you can do it. And they were. And on some channels on TV, yes, they'd be shut down, and they still are shut down for telling the truth. But it's like, I think that they've cottoned on, they can't do it again. And if, well, I mean, touch wood, we'll see what the fuck happens. But it's like, if they do, there will be a hell of a fight. And just because it's just, I don't know about you, Todd, but I was thinking for a few years before coronavirus, I wonder what would happen if a big virus ever did hit the world, blah, blah, blah. And then here it allegedly does, and we actually saw what that was like. So we've done that now, and they'll have to really ramp it up to do it again, and I don't know how they're going to manage that.
Well, I actually think that they're going to do it, but in slightly different ways. So one of the things that we have now is this phenomenon on the planet of these orbs or plasmas. And I think that is one of the agendas, because on my channel, we talk a lot about the ancient hidden history, the Anuruna gods, aka the Anunnaki. And there seems to be a really big push to seed the fact that extraterrestrials are real and into the consciousness of the people, even though for many, many years they told us that it was not true. And then like 2-3 years ago, Pentagon papers came out. The Pentagon came out and says, actually, by the way, they're real. You know what I mean? Facts. And no one actually batted an eye. Everyone was like, yeah, whatever. You've been lying to us for years and years and years. Why should we believe you now? So I think that one of the agendas that they have now is they're going to use the predictive programming with these orbs and these UFO, because UFO just means identified flight object, right? And that's really what it is, because we still don't really know what they are, because some people call them drones, some people call them orbs, some people call them spheres, some people call them plasmas. And I think that this is part of the agenda, because I think that later on, that might be the only card that they can pull to instill massive fear into the populace. Because what did the pandemic do? And how was it able to come about? It was through fear. So if a high percentage of the population don't have the fear of a pandemic anymore, of a virus that they can't see, the only thing could be is ETs, right? So what do you think about
that? I think it's a very interesting thesis. If they are ETs and, UFOs, UAPs, that's a lot of acronyms. And it's like in our lifetimes, it's been flying around for 70 years, from 50s to Roswell, Close Encounters, X-Files, and now this. And all the time, as our audience can probably tell, I'm an open-minded fella and I'll listen to anything. And but the idea that we're alone in the universe is ridiculous enough. So, there's a bunch of, who really thinks that we can't be. What I'm thinking is that they don't seem to be very aggressive. They seem to be monitoring things and checking out, and loads and loads of interesting. I watch the occasional crazy video on YouTube, and loads of interesting lights above the Palisades fires in California over the last few weeks, and these like really unexplainable things, odd looking things which could be explained as drones. And then if they are drones, then they're the most weird kind of government experimental ones. Just lots of very strange lights in the sky and above the New Jersey as well. And they're the same kind of things. And as you say, there was the Pentagon hearing with Michael Schellenberger, the world's most respected journalist there, giving evidence about things that he's read and seen, and and he's saying, well, come on, what's going on here? And a good panel and being taken seriously. And it's like you say, there might be a buttering up of people for an expose, a real one, by a presidential mouth. Not that anybody's necessarily going to listen to Trump because he's entertaining as much as anything else. So it's like, are they going to do that? Fascinating if they do. And it'll be up to the theorists like you and me to work out why they're doing it. And as I say, though, it's not Independence Day. They're not taking us out. It's not the War of the Worlds. These are advanced enough to get here. They're probably advanced enough to not just take us out like meat as well. So I don't know. And it will certainly be interesting.
Well, my theory on this, and this from reading a lot of TDs, is that I think that there's sort of like a multi-step approach, because ultimately it seems that the game plan is to just make us all slaves. And like you said, there's a uniparty. But when you go a little bit deeper, this goes back to antiquity, back to Sumeria with the Anunnaki and their gods. And from their text, it looks like there are two factions fighting against each other for control of Earth and us. And we're just the pawns. We're just the collateral damage. So this serpent versus eagle, this supposed good versus bad, this right versus left, this male versus female, there always seems to be a duality that's at it. And what happens is that this duality is being controlled by a monolithic sort of like group or groups or energy or entity that is basically slow walking us to have us under total tyranny physically, mentally, spiritually, and economically. So one of the things that I am seeing through the tea leaves is that the next step that they're going to have to pull is the economic card. Because if you pull the economic card and you implode the economy, it's going to instill fear, uncertainty, and downright violence, because people will start robbing and killing and raping and all that kind of stuff, right? And then you can say, hey, well, the economy failed, so we have a new solution, central bank digital currency. And then when you start to get that there now, oh, by the way, we have some new friends. They're ETs. So they could be fake aliens, real aliens, or a combination of both. Who knows? But I think the ET extraterrestrial agenda is part of it. So, hey, by the way, there's nothing to fear. They're actually our friends. And then later on, when they start to do magnificent things, as prophesied in scripture, then we humans, we will start to worship them, which is what we used to do in antiquity, in Babylon and Sumeria. When the Anunnaki walked on the planet, we used to worship them. So then we come full circle, where now we had a collapse of the economy. They tell us ETs are real. They're our friends. So they get us through the central bank digital currency, because the money is no good anymore. And then they get us spiritually now, where we start worshiping ETs. And then the next step now is to just upload your consciousness. If you want to be like these ETs, just get a chip in your brain, and you can have all the knowledge and all the power that they have, and you could become like gods. And then, boom, they've got us trapped. Sounds very farcical, very possible, but that's my thesis on how they're going to sleepwalk us into getting us into one moral, spiritual, economical, and physical union. You know?
Oh, it's a fascinating thesis, and I've got no objection to any more than anything else. You know, it's like extrapolating what's going on into what could happen, and that's prediction, and why not? And it definitely comes back to the thing I sort of said earlier about them trying to take us away from the natural human, which is something we can trust. You know, unless we are a figment of someone else's imagination entirely, I'm happy to go with the fact that you and I right now are at least in charge of what we're doing right now, at least to give us some kind of autonomy for a little while, you know, because otherwise you'll start to go crazy and also to not do anything. And that's probably the biggest problem, because I want to at least, if the alien overlords do what they do what they might do under this conversation in our lifetimes, at least I want to make sure I've done a bunch of human-based art beforehand, including this podcast. You know what I mean? That sort of, at least we can take that power. But when it comes to meta power structures, you're quite right. And we've got no idea what's actually going on. I think that the dualities you talk about, I mean, I'll go and have a better research of Anunnaki stuff, because I know my history, but maybe not all the in-depth, which I should. So that's the great thing about this. You get to learn something, and I'll go and investigate all that to flesh out my knowledge of it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating genre of information to research, because this is one of the reasons why I'm able to understand really what the Matrix is and how the Matrix works, because as scripture says, there's nothing new under the sun. And I see a lot of patterns of old just having slight modifications and, you know, occurring today in the present. And this is why Mark Twain says that those who don't study history are bound to repeat it, right? And it appears that for a big part, we are really repeating history. And one of the things that we have that is sort of like a repeat of history, but in a different form, is the conquest of Europe, right? Through the Islamic migration. And, you know, Europe is about, I would say, probably 20 to 30 years ahead of the United States and most countries in the world for this phenomenon. And, you know, Islam, we have massive waves of people from Islamic countries coming into our countries, and have produced things like the cover-up of the grooming gangs in Rotherham, Luton, and Oldham. So why is there such a big push back from the government and mainstream media to even talk about this in this issue when it's an actual undenied fact? What do you think that is?
Well, we talked earlier about the start of Tony Blair's immigration wave, as you've said, and it has been a wave, and something that they haven't wanted to talk about. And then the Tories have started to shore up because of GDP, not because of culture. For Labour, it's about culture and getting everyone to love each other and be the same. And then for Tories, it's about keeping the GDP going because everyone's retiring too early. And the problem is that when the Muslims that are being imported are often not, and I'm being kind again, is not the ones from the middle classes of those countries who are going to come over and not behave in those ways. They're going to come over and they've come from Pakistani villages where there's a bit of gossip saying, do you know how easy English girls are? And that's been the extent of the conversation. They come over here, they're not told anything. They're said, go and get on with life over there, into that community. And in that community, they just go and carry on these ways. And indeed, there are people on the street in Britain, and it's something that we don't have to do beforehand. Well, I suppose there's always been protection issues of girls and women here in various ways, but then to have it so exploited cynically because the argument is, if you don't want this to happen to her, she shouldn't be out on the street. And no, she's allowed to do whatever she wants without you doing that sort of thing. That's being in a Western liberal democracy. So those two things being at clash is intolerable. And it's come to an intolerable thing in 2025 with the grooming gangs, thanks to Musk and Mr. Tommy Robinson to a certain extent, if you want to. And mentioning it is terrifying to Keir Starmer and Labour just as they come in to power. They blame immediately the Tories for not doing anything about it. But it was their ethos that started the whole thing, and the Tories just had to sort of go along with it. So the whole thing was set in train by Keir Starmer's godfather, Tony Blair. And now Blair's godson, Keir Starmer, is panicking about what to do about it, surrounded by power feminists in the cabinet who will just say, this is all fine, it's all going to be fine, because they are terrified of losing their seats. Because Jess Phillips, almost lost her seat by 700 votes, just 700 kept her from being kicked out by an Islamist candidate. That's how crucial things are. They're like coming down to the boxes in America. So they're panicking about social cohesion. They're panicking about proper vigilante style attacks, which is an understandable fear, but that should not go into censorship. If you the problem with telling the truth is that some journalists will get really, really wind up about it and will try to get the gander up of Indigenous white people about what's going on there. Naturally, it's very, very shocking stuff. But to take the law into one's own hand then is another societal problem. And Keir Starmer immediately supported the banging up of a lot of people over social media posts a year ago. He's still suffering from that now, and he'll continue to. People shouldn't be imprisoned for expressing themselves online. I come from that camp of people. There's a whole other people saying they shouldn't have broken the law. They were threatened to burn down hotels. You're like, yeah, but things don't actually... These social media posts have not led to any actual real world violence. There's nothing they can connect those streams to. So basically, answer to your question, they're panicking about things going off because of what the grooming gangs have done, and it coming out into being massively exposed just as Keir Starmer comes to power. He's probably not going to recover from it truly, but he's got enough rope to hang himself over the next couple of years anyway, so we'll see what he does.
Well, I don't understand how Keir Starmer could actually even be the Prime Minister, because Keir Starmer was the chief prosecutor at the time when they were investigating Jimmy Savile, right? And he is the one, and for those people that are non-European or British, Jimmy Savile was probably the biggest pedophile in Europe, Britain. Like, he did it for 50 years, and he was also a necrophiliac, who was a person that had sex with dead bodies, right? And he was best mates with the current king of Britain now, King Charles. That was his best mate. And funnily, when they were investigating Jimmy Savile, Keir Starmer is the one that decided that there was not enough evidence to prosecute or to bring a case And what happened to him shortly after that? He was knighted. So he is Sir Keir Starmer. So is like he got, just like Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile was knighted. So he was actually Sir Jimmy Savile, right? After all of that got covered up and, you know what I mean, what's not. So it's almost like similar to how the government paid the bonuses of the banksters who crashed the economy. Is like the British government has rewarded people and made them sir for doing extremely bad acts and covering up extremely bad acts, right? And it is an absolute fact that Jimmy Savile was who he was.
Well. When it comes to rewarding people for failure, Sadiq Khan is probably the worst offender for this, having done the ULEZ thing and being an unremovable pillar of London, who is hated by a great deal of the amount of that city for what appears to be the third world that he's pulled it into. Another for failure being promoted is Mr. Tom Watson, who falsely accused the Tory politicians such as Leon Britton and Harvey Proctor of child abuse. He said that the person that accused them, he believed him, and the guy who accused them turned out to be a liar, a fantasist who got 16 years himself. But what happens to Tom Watson? He gets a knighthood, even though he called Harvey Proctor evil. On the Jimmy Savile question, because I'm a writer on false allegations as well, a lot of the time, we have to admit that there wasn't a trial, so he wasn't a tried man, and some people that I've communicated with, correspond with, say that the entire thing was a deeply exaggerated thing done as an attack, basically, on the BBC. So it's a very thorny subject. Also, there is no trial, and there's no dead bodies here. There's just a bunch of allegations. I'm not here defending Jimmy Savile, but I am saying he's a one-man distraction from a lot of other things that Keir Starmer did wrong and worse, which was the believe the victim policy, which was the upending of the innocent until proven guilty principle, which sent thousands of men to prison on the basis of believing the accuser. And with the Jimmy Savile thing, if you take it back to its heart, it's a believe the accuser thing. Yes, there were 50 of them, and so they gathered lots of stories about Jimmy being an opportunist. But to the necrophile, I mean, this is all like stuff invented by journalists, exaggerations. But the believe the victim thing is a far bigger systemic thing that Keir's done, which, as you say, he's been rewarded for, first with Sir and now with Prime Minister. However, his chickens are coming home to roost because he is the least popular Prime Minister in British history. So all this messing around with the British system and with the concept of law is biting him on the arse now.
But the thing is that the problem we have is that I read a very interesting book called The Dictator's Handbook by Bruce Mesquita de Bueno. I think that's his name from memory. And he showed that it doesn't actually matter if you have a autocracy or a quotation marks democracy. Government will always be corrupt, because for an autocrat to be in power, he has to please the army, because the army is what keeps him in power. And then for a supposed democracy, or even if a constitution, you have a republic, I mean, they're just different words, but it's very similar how it works. You have to please a whole bunch of people, and those are mainly your donors. So his evidence showed that, in fact, government can't be anything but corrupt because of its nature of how it works. So I think that we actually need a complete change in system and governance to get away from the corruption. Because you think about the reason why Jimmy Savile was protected is because he was best mates with King Charles, right? Who at the time was Prince Charles. That was his best mate, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of accusations as well with the royal family, which, again, you're not even allowed to talk about in the British media. You get cancelled. There's stories of the royal family in Canada were being the last people who have seen a bunch of children in an orphanage in Canada, and there's like 45 children disappeared. Now, okay, You can't say, well, why is that? Why was that not even investigated, right? You get blackballed for even bringing up certain things like that. Do we know if they were involved in anything? We don't know. But what we do know is that there was a mass cover-up. When there's a mass cover-up, it means that there's something to hide. And it's the same thing with Jimmy Savile and King Charles now. There seems to be, and then look at Prince Andrew, he was connected to Jeffrey Epstein. So when you actually look at the tea leaves, you have, let's say we have zero proof. We have a lot of circumstantial affiliation and evidence pointing to being friends with not so nice people. Is that fair to say?
Well, I suppose it depends on the position you come from. With the problem is that what am I trying? Is that I distrust the media much more than I distrust individuals. So, and that, I mean, I can't comment on a person like King Charles, who there's a lot of information that says the Queen was in charge of the entire cabal, the entire caboose, before she died, and that indicates that he might be now too. So, is that the case? Who knows? It's my home country's old tradition, so it's not something that's available for my scrutiny. Put it that way. But Prince Harry and Prince Andrew are. Prince Andrew was accused of the having sex with a 17-year-old, which is not a crime in this country, and also she's a false accuser in the past. So those facts taken into account. Also, the fact he's always been called Randy Andy, which means that he's got his own moral code. Apparently, he's not a very nice bloke. That's irrelevant to me. What I do know is that there is a anti-royalist media which I don't disagree with and I don't agree with, but I know what it is and I can see what it does. And it doesn't like his way. It can't really attack Charles because Charles is all green and stuff, but it can attack his dissolute younger brother. And so I just, there's an area of sympathy for him because he's had his entire thing being destroyed for basically apparently being too horny. When it comes to the Jeffrey Epstein aspect, I don't think people should be demonized for the friends they keep because we never know the friends we're actually keeping. Some of them, I've been accidental for friends with proper criminals in the past and not known till after the fact. And also people have done things in the past that they've now completely got over, or it's a part of the history, So I don't keep people in boxes in the way that the media would like people to, because that's like cancelling in a way. So, I mean, that's not about, I don't know, Jeffrey Epstein, but it's like when it comes to the list and things like that, it's the morality of the public going, whoa, we want to see that list, because the best way to take down powerful people is with an unprovable sex allegation. But that's the dynamic that I'm a lot more concerned about than I am about what they were actually doing. It's like, unless we're actually talking about very, very, I don't want to be too sort of down the rabbit hole with all this, but unless, they're extremely young, which is a massive problem, we don't know what the island was all about. There's still a bunch of allegations. And yes, he did admit to certain things, so we have an idea. But the fact that everybody's on every aeroplane who knows, you don't know what everyone around you is doing. And a lot of things that you get involved with. If you go to a club, which happens to have its back rooms being a brothel, you don't know about the brothel, So that's the reality of that kind of situation over the conspiratorial headlines, which are completely part of the industry too. So I'm not against them. I just try to bring a different kind of objectivity to the questions you're asking.
I understand your point of view, but we have to really look at some things. Like, there's a saying called birds of a feather flock together, and there's for good reason. And you can't, I think it's hard for a lot of people to be able to justify why these powerful men have friendships with people who do very bad things. And I think that you can't say that they didn't know, because at that level, it's known. That's an absolute fact. When you dig in the rabbit hole in terms of Hollywood, the music industry, what really runs the world, we have a satanic, pedophilic solar cult worship group of people who use pedophilia, who use also a lot of drugs and basically coercion in order to get people of influence to do the things that they want to do. And Jeffrey Epstein has been accused by hundreds of people, and so has Jimmy Savile been accused by many, many people. And I don't think that those people are going to come out and just put their head above the pulpit and say, hey, he did that to me if it wasn't real. Do we have absolute proof in terms of we were there? No. So you're correct in that sense where we don't have absolute proof. But what we would say is that the mere fact that these people have been connected to two of those types of people, for me, raises a lot of questions on their affiliations with those people. And secondly, the mere fact that there's a lot of pushback to even mention that, another thing. And thirdly, you're literally silenced in the mainstream for even bringing up these things. So I think that where there's smoke, there's fire. So I do understand your point because you try to be fact-based, but I do think that where there's smoke, there's fire. Anytime you have a bit of a cover-up, it shows that they have information there that people don't want the world to know, right? That's how I see it. So I try to be as objective as possible because we don't have facts like, you know what I mean? Like the sun is outshining now, so that's an absolute fact. So we don't have facts like that we can use. But the affiliation is very questionable, I would say, at least.
Well, this is a difficult part of birds of a feather flock together. That's an excuse to be able to speculate from a position of citizen journalists, which is, I suppose, what we're doing at the moment. And it's like, let me put that in a better way, is that if a resourced journalist from a proper media, some serious sort of, I can't imagine where it comes from because you're quite right, it's impossible. If a proper journalist can go out there and get the facts that back up all the suspicions, then we'd have something to look at. Otherwise, we're just saying we don't trust these people because they're powerful. And the problem with that is that the thing that's got Keir Starmer, the thing that Keir Starmer's destroyed the British justice system is by believing all the allegations that you're mentioning. There can't be all those things happening if something didn't happen. Well, it's very possible to get lots and lots of complainants to corral stories together in the same direction, because I write about this stuff all the time. I'm not saying that happened with Savile and Epstein, not at all, because it's of a different scale with Epstein particularly. It's just that it is very, very possible for interested lawyers and journalists to, for money and for political clout, to organise people who've had experience of people who don't like them for some reason or might have been sacked by them, to push them into accusations of criminality, which might be or might be very exaggerated. I'm just asking you and your viewers to open your mind to the possibility of exaggeration that goes on, because I just write about that all the time, you know?
Well, that does happen a lot, and we see that with a lot of men of clout or men of influence. So we've seen a lot of men being falsely accused, even athletes falsely accused of rape and stuff. And I think there was a case in the United States with an American footballer, I can't remember his name, but he was accused. Bryant? Well, he was a basketballer, but he was accused as well. But there was another footballer and there was even a boxer as well. I remember this particular one with a boxer. He lost about 20 million. And I don't think he did any time. And it was proven that the lady made it all up. So yes, what you're saying is a part of that sort of conversation. So you're right where you can't basically believe only the accuser, right? So there is some nuance in it, yes. But what we do have is we have men that have money or position of influence being accused of doing things where it comes out where it wasn't the case. Look at even the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp story, right? You know what I mean? She accused him falsely. Then you had, like I said, Kobe Bryant, he was accused falsely as well. Then there was this American footballer that I saw that he lost his contract, right? And it was proven that she made it all up, and he no one would touch him. You know what I mean? He can't even get back another contract, right? So how he's going to make up for his lost earnings? There was a baseballer that happened to as well. So it does happen. But even in the UK, there was this guy that was a footballer. He used to play, I think, for Sheffield United, and I think he went to prison and everything like that.
To Chet Atkins.
Yes.
Chet Evans. Sorry, not
Evans. Yeah. And he was falsely accused. He went to prison, did time. I think he plays back in the Premiership, right? So I mean, there's some people that can get redeemed, but not everyone does. So you're right. The whole Me Too movement, you need to have merit, right? You need to have evidence, because you can't just believe the accuser. So with that being said, like you mentioned Tommy Robinson before. So what are your thoughts on Tommy Robinson and the work that he has done? Because he gets a lot of criticism. So I'm just interested to hear what's your take on him and the work he's done.
Yeah, well, he's a working class bloke with depressive ADHD, would be my armchair diagnosis of him. He obsesses on a subject because he's not going to let it go, because he's got a sense of harm being done to his community. So, and that's been the story for him for 20 years. He doesn't say anything that Douglas Murray doesn't say. So, and Douglas Murray does it in this, hope that the viewers know Douglas. And it's like this, he does it in this very public school, very entertaining, eloquent, posh, gay way. And then Tommy Robinson does the same stuff. They're raping our daughters in his working class Cockney way, wherever he's from, Essex. And he won't let the authorities forget about it. He knew that if he played the video again that he'd made on the grooming gangs, he would go to prison. He made a video saying, I know I'm going to prison for disclosing this, but I need you to see it. And Elon Musk got to see it. It took a massive act of bravery for Tommy to do that. And also, it was very telling that he went back inside and he felt a relief from going into solitary, which indicates how stressful things were outside and possibly elsewhere in his prison, where he's outside, exposed to various stimuli and hassle and aggro. He was actually able to get away from that for a while. And you have to wonder how much of that's to choice and how much he's allowed to be himself. You worry about him because he's a hero to many. I treat him as a public figure. I find the fact that Reform and the other parties on the right ignore him to be a problem, because all parties in Britain should acknowledge all people that live in their country, even members of the so-called far right, because that gets, of course, now called, everybody who's not ultra-progressive gets called a far right if they criticise ultra-progressiveness. They now call it far right. We've all cottoned on to that. I've been called it, not directly to my face, but around me, far right stuff. And it's like, anybody knows me knows that's ridiculous. And anybody who calls most other people, including people like Lawrence Fox, who really might say some far right things, but he's not. He's an old liberal, you know. And Tommy is a working class bloke who's done a lot of investigation. They've tarred him with, the English Defence League is now disbanded 10 years ago. There's a lot more of a far right edge to them, but they're an old story. Like the National Front here is the problem is the manipulation of language, and Tommy's a very good example of how that can be politicized. And him being in prison right now again is another example of the twisting of language that Keir Starmer specialises in.
So can you, because you're a British man, I mean, I'm British as well, but for some of my non-American viewers, can you tell a little brief history of Tommy so they can get an understanding of who he is, what he stands for, and why he's doing what he's doing?
Well, okay, he's a man, I think he's now in his 50s. He's been covering the grooming gang subject, which has become to be known to be called, because we know what we're talking about, which is the majority Pakistani immigrants in the northern towns of the UK, like Oldham and Telford and Rotherham, for decades would exploit the young women we were talking about earlier and rape and torture and all sorts on a very regular industrial level. Tommy Robinson spotted this decades ago and has started to investigate it to doorstep them and to investigate them and question them in a documentary, in a number of documentaries. And he was known for this subject. For years, the mainstream media, to avoid that subject, just said far right in order that people didn't look at the subject. Now, Elon Musk getting involved is just saying, look at the subject. I don't care what you call him, because we're post-language. You asked me to just explain to the viewers actually who he is. He's a working class English bloke who cares a lot, who I remember hearing him once say, I heard my gran say, all these people are coming around are moving into my community, and I don't feel like this is my home anymore. I think when he was a teenager. And since then, I don't think he's been trying to kick them out. I think he's been trying to scrutinize what Islam is at heart. And he's a lot more vocal on the actual subject without letting it go. He's much less kind in the sense of cultural Islam that I might be, because I lived in an Islamic country for 10 years. I'm not saying it's different because he hasn't. I'm just saying that it's a massive thing. 1.8 billion is a lot of people. So whatever view we want to give the problem, like we've already talked about now, it's like Tommy's just saying, look at the effect it's having on our towns and cities. And the establishment is saying, don't look at the effect it's having on towns and cities. And that's why he's being demonized, basically, right now.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that for my American viewers, Europe is about 30 years ahead of y'all. And y'all have issues on mass migration with military-age men, but the thing is that they speak another language, but culturally there is some similarity. What we have in Europe and in Britain is we have these waves upon waves of illegal immigrants, massive migration coming in from a different culture, where it is almost like, okay, it is basically, I'm going to say, it's almost like an attack on white people, really, because if the white people in Britain did that to a minority, oh my goodness, you would never hear the end of that. Like, white people bad, white men are bad, right? They're the scum of the earth. That's what you would hear. But the studies show, I think the statistics are that I think 4% of the population of Muslims live in England, in the UK. And then in that population, you have like 50% children and 50% adults. So then you have in the adult one, which is 2%, you have 1% which are male, roughly, give or take. So you have 1% of the population being responsible for over 50% of the sex crimes, basically. It's a staggering number, right? Mm-hmm. And you're not allowed to talk about it. And what Tommy has been saying is like, hey, I don't have a problem with Muslims per se, but we have a problem that is coming from just massive waves and waves of immigration. Or, by the way, the ideology that they have is the reason why they're doing it. Or also, the most popular name of children being born in the UK now is Muhammad. So why is that? And we're not allowed to ask these questions because it goes back to this whole diversity is our strength. And like you said, when Blair opened up the gates to mass migration, they were trying to sell it to us as a great thing, but it's not really that good. So what we have now is that, we're being silenced. We can't even talk about this. And like, I think it was good that Elon Musk was able to put a shining light on it. But the thing is that how far are we to, because we live there now, how close are we to actually even understanding the depth of this whole scandal? Or is it simply just being covered up again?
Well, I think kind of a lot of the people responsible, the perpetrators, have been imprisoned. They've been on trial over the last few years and in prison. These things don't always get to the front pages, though they do actually come. It's just it did need Elon's amplification for it to give Keir Starmer the wins, even that hasn't, because things are so when things don't affect you here like this. I mean, it's doing him a lot of damage politically. So it's doing the job, which is what Elon really wants to do. A lot of the perpetrators have gone away, as is correct, though they'll be surprised, and they always say, they've said things like, it wasn't that bad, what's happened here? And as well, by the way, there are some false allegations inside all that, but I'll leave it over there for now. And it's like, they're saying that they won't even have an inquiry to sort out why it happened. And the reason that it happened, as you allude, is political correctness, because people are too scared to go, because the police are too scared to go in those communities and scrutinize the ways of non-white people. That is what's being, that's what an inquiry is wanted for. I think an inquiry should happen for that too. Labour are terrified of that happening, as are the Conservatives, because they know that back in the day, they were telling people, don't scrutinise those communities too much, just let them get on with their own thing. That was Tony Blair's thing. Sharia courts coming to Britain all over the place to handle their own issues in their own way. What was that own way involve? I hope it doesn't involve stoning on British territory or female genital mutilation, which we've seen in certain cases it does. Having those medieval behaviours, I don't even have to say Islamic, medieval behaviours here is unacceptable. They know it's unacceptable. That's why they don't want the scrutiny. But people like you and I and Tommy are saying, no, we need the scrutiny in order to make things better, multiculturalism or not. If you don't have that, it'll happen eventually. So he's just putting off the transparent inquiry as to why was it allowed to happen. Not we need to put those people away, because honestly, loads of them have already gone away. That has happened. It's just we have to find out why has it happened and who were the people at the top who knew it was going on. And then they have to apologise. They might have to be criminally sanctioned themselves, perverting the course of justice, that kind of thing. Why not? If they've done that sort of thing wrong, then absolutely. And that is the part where I think an inquiry should happen too. The conversation's going off the boil a little bit now because it's been rampant for a couple of weeks on it.
There seems to be this relationship or alignment between the left and the Islamic sort of community, which I find quite ironic because their ideologies are diametrically opposed to each other. And this is going back to the culture wars as well, because the left-wing woke mentality is like, kumbaya, love everyone, let's hold hands and be friends. And in that, you have the whole transgender movement and the homosexual movement and stuff. But what we do know about Islam for sure is that those things are heavily punished in an Islamic country. So I kind of find it a very weird relationship that they have where they support each other. But I think that a lot of people don't really understand that if you let Islam grow, it will be a parasite that will eventually eat its host and become the dominant thing. Because if you look at history, Islamic history, well, for some people that don't know, the non-Muslims had to pay something called a jizya tax, right? And then if you were even the lower class, you were called a dhimmi, right? So you were like the worst. So there was classism, because remember what I said earlier, that Islam is not a religion, it's a deen. It's a political system that uses the ideology of Islam to conquer and propagate its ideology, right? Its political system, because you have Sharia law. So what you have then is that this unholy alliance that I think that the left-wing people don't realize that the Muslims, when they are in dominance, they will eat them. They will be the first that will be slaughtered. So why is it you think then that they just can't see that the Muslims are not really their friends? Mm-hmm. What do you think that is?
Well, that's what happened in the 1979 revolution in Iran, isn't it? With the Shah kicked out by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, supported by the socialists of there. And then as soon as that had happened, they just killed all the socialists. So it was a very good pre-warning as to what you mean. the answer to it, and I think the left does actually know this as well as the Islamists, is that my enemy's enemy is my friend. So at the moment, that is, like I said earlier, white, male, heterodox capitalism is the thing that must be attacked at all costs. And the global elite that we allude to earlier on, by the way, isn't any one of the is a bunch of different people. All kinds of different people within that thing, and the Jews and Islam and Chinese. They're all. Let's not worry about the one world government for now. But it's like as a mass, it is the people that I represent here are the ones that they are trying to take down. They know it's the most. I mean, Germany in the Second and First World Wars has a lot to answer for, obviously, but it was also a very good demonstration of what white organized power can do. And everything that America has done for 150 years is another example of that organization, pretty efficient stuff. The rest of the world knows that. I'm not talking about me here, I'm talking about them, you know what I mean? And the rest of the world knows that. And they know that that's the efficiency they have to chip away at if they're going to get their equal outcome balancing for everybody, sort of coffee-coloured everybody thing going on. And, I have nothing, of course, against mixed-race people or anything else like that. It's just that there's also nothing wrong with cultural integrity about keeping your own thing going, if that's your priority, But, of course, we get called racist if we even mention that. And I only say that kind of thing because I know loads of black people who will only go black because they want to keep that integrity. And everyone that I know says, well, that's absolutely fine if you want to do that. It's also fine to go the other way, but not as a political statement to go, I'm going to go with someone of another race in order that I do away with the one that I am. And that's where the left tends to come from, my enemy's enemy. And so whilst that's the case, Islam can get together, and that's the Queers for Palestine. It's the perfectly put comedy is Queers for Palestine, isn't it? Where you go out there, you'll be chucked off the top of a Palestinian building, but over here, you're fighting white hetero capitalism. So, okay, good luck with that. And they know they'll be first off if they don't know that, they must have realized it by now, and eventually they'll get older and realize it too. If they do ever take power, they'll see it then. They will see what Islam comes to do to them. And I hope we never get to that place,
Well, the thing is now is that there's a study that came out that showed that on the trajectory that Europe is on, by 2050, countries like Sweden will be up to 30% Muslim, the UK 17%, France 18%, and Germany 20% due to high birth rates and mass migration. So how do you see Britain and Europe coping and becoming if that becomes a reality?
Well, kind of just in order to not be alarmist about it, the trajectory has already changed on that kind of on the model, because those sort of charts, that's the trajectory, and there it goes to that. It's already changed. So Germany is already enacting harsher deportations than anywhere. America's doing its own deportations in another direction because they don't have the Islamic thing over there in the same way to Mexico and China and things. Sweden has just over the last couple of months, and there's none of these people coming out with hate rhetoric and doing this stuff. They're just enacting government policy. Right, you on the boat back. And it just because they've seen what crime is happening, especially Sweden. I don't know if you've been following that news, but they have seen the gang warfare in the most sort of peaceful country, famously in the world, Switzerland, Sweden, become massive crime holes in the middle of their big towns. They're like, what the fuck has happened here? Well, we know what's happened here. Islamic gangsterism's come to your... and it's not just Islamic there, it's all kinds of multicultural gangsterism coming in because you're importing people who are fleeing war-torn countries. Well, you don't know what they're fleeing, whether they're fleeing a life of crime, maybe. So it's like that's what people have started to wake up and to say, it's important that people realise if they proudly identify as left-wing, they don't have to abandon that by being protective of their territory against erosion, and if crime and a hatred of a trying to unraveling of the dominant culture is going on, then that's erosion. And you want to protect against that, whichever kind of politics you're from. Of course, that's been called far right traditionally, that word doesn't have much more legs. And these countries in Europe that I mentioned are pushing back that trajectory. So I don't think it will get there. If it does, there'll be, I don't like to use the term race war, but there'll be something like, I mean, it'll look very different from that anyway, you know? So because of the controls, we're not really able to have a race war anymore. I can't imagine how that would happen.
Yeah, the thing is, what I find is quite strange is that we seem to have reverse racism now. So we had a period in our history where there was racism against black people. Now we're having racism against white people. And it makes me think, like, if that is how they start on each subgroup, because the way I see humanity, I see us as one human race, and I see us as just having subgroups of that race. So me personally, I don't see an importance of a color of a person's skin. I look at what is actually in their heart, and I look at their actions and attributes, me personally. Other people may be different, but again, you're free to have your opinion. But I always, and I find that black people, they tend to get really sort of like have victim mentality about what happened in the past. But because I've studied history, I'm like, y'all are not really looking at this thing deep enough. My research has shown me that the first place where we had like real racism was in the Indus Valley, when the Aryans came out the north and pushed the Dravidians down south. And the Aryans are the ones that brought Hinduism, and that is what caused the caste system through the Brahmins and then all the other castes, right? And the Dravidians were the darker people that some had woolly hair, but they were definitely not like how you have a lot of the people in the Indus Valley, which is now Pakistan, India, Nepal, and those surrounding places that are all, when you look at even the Bollywood, they're all lighter, whiter skin Indians, right? And that's because that is seen as really good. So my research has shown me that that's the place where it seems to have started. So it's like if they've taken the technology of divide and conquer, started a really long time ago, and perfected it, and then it just seemed that this cycle, the last 500 years, was the time for the black people to have their time, because it started in the Indus Valley with them. And then now it seems to be shifting to white people now. And it makes me wonder if this is how it was done, where you get white people hating themselves and actually the ones that are trying to basically oppress themselves, but doing it some weird way where they get like other people to do it to them because of guilt of what they did in the past. So it's kind of like this massive culture war that we're having, and politics seems to be the driving force of it. And I can't remember who said it. Was it James Carney that said culture is downstream from politics? Is it him that said that?
Okay, no, don't know.
I can't remember. But yeah, and it's true, culture is downstream from politics, but yet still, the politics seems to be controlling the culture. And the reason for that is because when you can divide people in all these little boxes, they're much, much easier to control. And we need to realize that we need to put our differences aside and realize that there's a giant monolith that is against all of us. And that should have been clear during the pandemic, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But we seem to be still bogged down with identity politics and race. And I honestly think race is rubbish, because I think we're just all humans, right? But I don't know, how far aware are we from people having that understanding that we're really one human race? We just have subgroups and we're all one. How far do you see we are away from that?
I think that, ironically, the Trump ascendancy has brought us closer to that. It's no surprise to people who are in touch with themselves. I think you are, and possibly I am, that it's an awareness that we're all people and there's no need for these artificial differences. We are different, and there's nothing wrong with that. And dividing us into groups within that is the problem. And then they know that they can operate this, and sex too, and then adding intersex. It's like, please, how many things, and why do you want your 94 genders and your 94 races plus? It's, yes, to have those controllable groups, to give people a sense of identity. It's absolute bullshit. There's a lot of conversation about class to be still had, and that's not old lefty me. That's just exactly what you just talked about, the Indus and all those things, which is fascinating. Those patterns reverberate around the world, including America. America likes to say, oh, we don't have class here when they talk about Britain. Like, no, you do. You have it all over the place. And the fact that the political class is Irish white, that's what the reality of it. That's why the Obama thing was such a shock. So, don't give me that. And it's like, so there's this kind of, the class thing gets ignored though, because identity politics is essentially woke, and woke is middle class, and it doesn't want to go to class or money because that's uncomfortable, because that's something that they need. It's those things that they don't like that they're happy to attack, So, are we close to universal understanding? Possibly not, and possibly we're not meant to. We'll have to see. I'll definitely always be on the side. Humanism, that is a label I'm happy with. Classical liberal is another one I am. And white English is one that I can't avoid. So, if people want to put me in those boxes, I don't mind them. But it doesn't stop me having Prince as my possibly number one or two main influence, having a bunch of black friends who I love to bits, and a handful of Muslim ones from Turkey. Do you know what I mean? So that's the reality of modern life. Is just so much more complex than any of the narratives they try to put us down.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I think that, everybody should be proud of sort of like their heritage, who they are, where they're born and stuff like that. I don't take the complete hard line that, you shouldn't, that all those things are just there to brainwash you. I think you should be proud of of who you are, right? Like, I'm a black guy. I'm proud to be black. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with you, Sean, saying that I'm a white British guy and I'm proud to be white British. I think that, because one of the things that I loved about Britain is that I grew so much as a person because I started to understand a lot of point of views of other people and why people are the way they are, right? Why do they speak certain languages? And I think that if we actually came together as one in a real way, in terms of like, okay, in reality, we share probably, I would say, 95% of commonalities where men, black, white, Indian, Chinese, we want to go out there and work and provide for our families. So then we want to raise a society, we want to live in a society that's safe and prosperous, right? So when we start to look as a collective on the things that we actually bring us together, the little things that separate us in terms of rich or poor or religion, I think we should actually put aside, because the more positive things you look for in your life, the more positive you feel about yourself. And if the more commonalities we look amongst ourselves, we'd realize, hold on a minute, there is an enemy, common enemy that we have. It is us versus them. And then what that would do is that actual coming together, we can actually share stuff, because I think that some subgroups are very good at certain things. So, for example, the Indians are very, very good at business, right? And either it is something that they're taught at school, or is it in their culture, or is it in their ethos? Whatever it is, that should be shared to the world, right? We have, for example, people like Americans that are very good at creating businesses. Like when you look at the old times, they were very entrepreneurial. There was something in the spirit of each subgroup, right, that was really, really good, right? The Chinese seem to be very good at mathematics and science and physics and technology. So there's something that is in their ethos that we should be spreading. So if we were to actually share skills and share ethoses, we would realize that, hold on, we actually really don't need government and we don't need religion, because we could actually share and then learn each other's language, we can get better communication and learn each other. Because I think that one of the great travesties is that we have so many different languages on earth, and it means that we can actually share ideas. And, I think that, like, I'm very blessed where there are people that in non-English speakers, I actually have quite a few followers in non-English speaking countries that listen to this podcast. And I just wanted to shout you out and be grateful because, ideas like these are not really shared because we have a lot of polarity, because it's all about I am right, you are wrong. And even though I may have some slight difference of opinions on you, I think that you deserve to have a platform to share those ideas. I can counter it, and I can still say, well, actually, you know what, I would push back a little bit here, or I understand your point, but I disagree here. And I think we need to have more dialogue because we're one human race, and we have very, very similar common beliefs in terms of we want to have the pursuit of happiness, we want to have a good life, we want to have children, we want to raise them in a safe way, we don't want to have to worry about the security. And I think that those common things bring us more together than separate us. And I think that we're at a crossroads right now where we're starting to realize that actually those are the things that are much more important than, me saying I'm better than you because I'm black, or you saying you're better than me because I'm white. Those things don't have any meaning, and they don't bring happiness, right? Having friends from all over the world, I think is a good sign of someone's character, because it means then that you can, adapt. Those that don't adapt are the ones that tend to have a very skewed perception of the world,
I think that's a great message there, Todd, that what you're saying is that you acknowledge the power, you know what it is, and you've studied it, you know what power is, and you've talked about lots of different parts of it, but you reject it at the same time in terms of between people. I couldn't agree more. And critical race theory is a big problem and often comes from Afro-Caribbean academics. It seems to be the root of it, sadly. And that's what I've learned over the last year or so, is by no means all black people. So many of them are absolutely not furious about it. They're just sort of, this is bullshit about it. And that's a relief because, I think it is too. And I come from where you do.
Yeah, and this is one of the messages I try to put on my platform, because we talk about many different things, and this is the first conversation like this that I've had on my platform about things like this, because these are kind of topics that I've wanted to delve in a little bit more on, because I want to show people that, there's hope in the world, that we can change. But my message has always been is that we need to work on ourselves. And the only way that we can make a change in the world is to go inside of us, work on ourselves, heal our fears and traumas, because it is from there that we create the external world. There's no point in having the beauty of your external comes from the beauty on the internal, because the internal is what is the creator of the outside reality. And I think that more people need to take stock and realize that we're being manipulated here, and we're being manipulated to fight each other and kill each other. And, this is one of the reasons why I think the government pushes us to do it, because it's like, so what do you think then the media and the government aren't able to see the difference between like the things that we talk about, which anyone listening can see, well, we're actually not taking sides here, but why is it then that we always get blackballed and ridiculed? And, what do you think then that so many people just can't see that they're trying to attack them. We're actually trying to say, hey, maybe you may want to consider something else. What do you think is about this phenomenon with government and media and stuff like that?
I think it's probably because we are individuals talking about individualism without being into, we're not talking about sex or capitalism or anything that's very easy to apply to individuals. We're talking about individual sovereignty. and that's a threat to power. And the media is obsessed with stories and having the conflict between things. So if it can't find, this is two guys essentially kind of agreeing on subjects, well, not always, but generally going forward in the sovereignty, possibly the libertarian line, that is a massive threat to the Guardian and the BBC, as we've discussed. And so the only way they could handle that threat is by attacking both of us for being stupid or a gammon or a black guy who doesn't know what the problems are. All those things which are wrong, and we can absolutely have them out, but they'd rather not have them out. They'd rather just publish it and then block us on social media. That's their way of going, and then having a massive share about the fact that, I don't know, if anyone picked up on this kind of chat, which is incredibly healthy, and then it's the kind of thing that Joe Rogan does, there's no of the labeling on his stuff. And that's why it's so popular and long form. And you kind of go out there and that they're actually talking about actual things. And when you do that, you see the boxes that you're alluding to. Yeah, it's helpful that we're able to speak in English. I acknowledge that. And that's my my country's victory of the past. And there we are with it. It's a very flexible language, is why. Apparently, they're going to have ear implants in the future where we can, as a person speaking Russian to me, will instantly translate it. That'll be interesting. But for now, English is the lingua franca, and thank goodness from my point of view.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, I'm really, Sean, really grateful for you to come on the platform, be the first guest that, allowed me to have a conversation like this, because I think that conversations like this are very important. I do agree with you that I think that podcasting is the new medium for information being shared. I think because you can get to see a person or hear them in long form, unfiltered, and answering questions. So after a while, you can get to tell the person's personality. And I think that is the reason why Donald Trump was elected. I mean, you can love Trump or hate Trump, but there are a couple of things that I really like about him. And one is that he seems to would talk to anybody, even people that he doesn't like. And I think that is an attribute that we all need to have, because I think that for you to be able to understand your enemy or person you don't like, you actually need to talk to them so you can understand their point of view. And we need to ask questions. So why do you believe this? Or why do you believe that? Why do you eat only with your right hand? Why do you do this, right? And for some reason, we've gone away from asking questions and just having to understand why. And, I think that this style of, media is going to be on steroids for the next few years. And I think that because honestly, most people that I talk to know, they listen to podcasts.
Yeah, me too.
Most people I know don't listen to the MSM, the mainstream media and stuff like that. And, I think that, we're in a good place where if you're trying to actually help humanity and you're trying to share a message and to be a positive influence, I think that we will make a change, because by default, human beings want to generate light. And by default, those people who are the light bearers will automatically attract people to them, because other people are attracted to light, just like the moth is attracted to the light. But what people fail to understand is that real power isn't money. Real power is actually being able to influence the next generation of geniuses to become their highest potential. And that is one of the things that I'm trying to do, where I want to help influence the geniuses out there that will hear things that are shared on my platform and will go away and make some sort of revolutionary technological something that can allow us to break this system, because we need an absolute break from the monolith that is just sucking everything. And we need to have more of a, I guess less centralization, more decentralization and more conversations like this, more people coming together and, trying to help. Because what I've realized from doing this podcast is that if you're not really out there trying to help people, then, what are you really doing, with your life? Because human beings, our default is to help, is to create light. And I would say, Sean, you are definitely one of the light bearers out there. So with that said, can you please tell the people where they can find you, where they can get some of your art from, how they can reach out to you and maybe even book you for a show if some of my listeners are also podcasters. So tell us all that good stuff.
Oh, yeah. Very, very good aims there you have with the things that we're trying to achieve. I really approve, like it. If people want to buy my books, which read a little bit like the way I speak with the terms of stupid humour mixed with very serious stuff, is on Amazon. It's to Sean B.W. Parker, SEAN. And yeah, I've got 10 books on there, 9 books, and 2 contributed to, so that would be lovely. And I'm a musician too. If they do Spotify under the same name, all over online, I'm Sean B.W. Parker. And on Spotify there, I've got 6 albums. And if they want the news and to keep up with me on a daily basis, I've got quite a lively X platform on the same thing. Thank you, Musk, for letting us speak like we're speaking now. They're in writing quite often. So yeah, I keep the news up over there on X.
Awesome. So all you have to do is just send me the links to all of those, and they will be in the description of this podcast. And as you know, people, I help spiritually inclined people burn fat and build muscle, because we are all about helping people get their gains. And if you would like to get into the best shape of your life, as you know, summer is coming soon, and summer bodies are built in the winter. So this is the time to actually get into shape and to get your stuff together. And not only that, getting in shape will help you to improve mentally and spiritually. So with that being said, if you are on a spiritual journey, or you would like to start a spiritual journey and you would like some help to remove your fears and traumas, hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246, or my name Todd Cave on Facebook, and I will help you to get some magic mushrooms. And if you would like the t-shirt that I'm wearing right now, it is from the Todd and Me store in Amazon, and this shirt is called Truth Isn't Learned, Truth is Realized. So if you would like to help support this podcast, and link to the store will be in this podcast. And also, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share, because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. And Sean, once again, thank you very much for coming on to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. It was really good to talk to you, and more good content and conversations like this are coming soon.
Thank you so much, Todd.
Soon. Yes, thanks, Sean. Thanks for coming on. Speak to you soon, people. Have a great, amazing, and fantastic day, and be the change you want to see. Cheers and namaste.